Alright gamers, it's time to get gaming. I'm gonna rank I guess not really gaming, it's more, I don't know when this channel became a book channel, but there's now more books in FNAF than games, so I mean I guess it just kinda happened. Anyway, today we're going to be ranking every story in Fazbear Frights, which I'm sure you know because you're definitely as well versed in the series as I am. It has, I believe, 24 stories at this point, and in about a week we're going to get another book, so this is going to be outdated very fast. I've already done this once, when that was like 3 books ago, so here we go again. My opinions, I'm sure, have changed. Your opinions, I'm sure, have changed. There's a lot of stories here, it's had some really interesting lore reveals, and it's just been fun. Even for the stories that don't really have anything to do with the lore at all, it's been fun, and I want to do it again, because why not? And we'll see if I can get it done in one sitting, because maybe not. Let's get straight into it, alright gamers, with the very beginning, Into the Pit. Now, with the recent release of Gumdrop Angel, Into the Pit has become a lot more interesting, because, apparently, it is much more connected to the overarching story than we thought. You see, we thought this was just a one-off story. It seems to be connected to Room for One More, in a small way, which I'll get to in a bit, but we didn't think it was that connected to the overall story all that much. Turns out it is, because in the latest epilogue, the detective who's investigating everything, Detective Larson, goes back to the presumably very same ball pit from Into the Pit, which is very interesting. So, and on its own, it's just a good story. It's interesting, it's fun, it's got Spring Bonnie, who's a character that's cool, it's got time travel, and yet it doesn't seem too out there once you've actually read the story, and I don't know, I enjoy it. This story, and I think I put this there in my first ranking as well, goes in S tier. Now, To Be Beautiful, the next one in our list, is a bit of a different story. Now, you see, To Be Beautiful, my opinions have changed on this rapidly ever since this first book release. At first I thought, oh, it's okay. Then I thought, oh, it's not that great. Now I'm starting to like it a lot more. See, the bad trend that all these stories have is they take very long to get to the action. Again, in Gumdrop Angel, you see that as well with the title story, Gumdrop Angel. Angel herself takes forever to get to any sort of scary thing, and that's, for some stories it works, and I think To Be Beautiful is one of those. I think it works pretty well in To Be Beautiful, because the whole time you've got this tease going on that when Sarah takes off her necklace, something bad is gonna happen, and it does happen, but the build-up to that is what really makes it all the more shocking when she turns to trash in her garage. This series is weird. So, I'm gonna give To Be Beautiful A tier. I think it almost would have worked better as, like, I don't know, a bit shorter. You know, some of these I think could work best if they weren't full novella-length stories, but To Be Beautiful still fits in that page length pretty well, unlike some other later stories that, again, we'll get to in a second. Count the Ways is a lot of people's favorites, and I just don't really like it. It's not scary. And I don't think that is very controversial to say, hopefully, or else I'm doomed to be dislike bombed. By the way, if this video gets 500 likes, I will... actually, I'm not sure. Maybe nothing, but I would still like to see 500 likes. It's a big goal, but you know what? Let's do it, because why not? Count the Ways isn't very scary. It's almost funny to me. Funtime Freddy, he's got some gags, he's got some little witty quips, much like me. We're both very witty people. I guess he's a bear, he's not really a person, but you know what I'm saying. It's just not all that scary. He's just kind of taunting her the entire time, and in the end we don't really get to see her die. We don't get to see any, I don't know, gore or something. Anything that's remotely disturbing. It's a good story. All these stories I at least can enjoy, but it's not scary, and that's what I want in these stories. So, I don't know, it's whatever. I'll put it in C tier. It's not the worst, but compared to the rest of the stories here, it's not the best. Now, next is actually the Stitch Wraith story, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with. The Stitch Wraith story, the very first one, is what introduces the Stitch Wraith and Detective Larson and this whole mystery, and I thought that was really cool. What better way to get people to buy your other books than by having an overarching mystery through all of them? I'm surprised we didn't see it coming. I'm sure we knew, I remember thinking, yeah, there's gonna be some lore in this series, but something that spans over the course of all these books, I don't know, for some reason I didn't expect that, and it's done pretty well. The Stitch Wraith story here, it sets up our antagonist. We had known nothing about the Stitch Wraith we thought it was air, for Pete's sake. It sets up, our main character, Detective Larson, who maybe isn't the most interesting character, but he gets better later on, and it made me spend a lot more money on these books later on. So, I mean, it did its job, and it's interesting. It's cool. So, epilogue number 1, I think, goes in A tier. I think. Next is Fetch, and I don't know what to think about this story anymore. Just like To Be Beautiful, my opinions on it have been changing so much over time. I like the gory bits. Parts of it seem very cringy. There's a part where a character exclaims, "That's Gucci." And I've never quite recovered from that. Overall, it's interesting. It's got some good parts, but it's also got some really cringy parts, and those just don't mix very well. So overall, I think I'm going to give Fetch A tier as well. It used to be S, but the cringy parts have only bothered me more over time. So I don't know. We're giving it A because it's good. It's so close to S for me, but it's just not quite there anymore. Now, on the other hand, Lonely Freddy, it's very similar to Be Beautiful. It's another story where the interesting part only really happens at the end. The rest is dedicated to character stuff, and in this story, it's done even better than To Be Beautiful. And the ending is good again, but I don't know, I can't, none of these stories where it's all building up to the ending have really resonated with me in an S-tier way, that classic S-tier way. None of them have really done that for me, and that's a real shame, because I like them, I just don't like them quite enough to say that they're the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And so Lonely Freddy, it's good, and I kind of feel bad about this, but I'm going to put this in A tier as well. It's better than To Be Beautiful, in my opinion, by a little bit, but it's not quite there. It's not quite an S tier. So we'll put it in A tier as well. I'm sorry, Lonely Freddy fans. Out of Stock, on the other hand, is one that I think is S tier. This, I think, handles the character versus action stuff perfectly, to a T. You have some good stuff which builds our characters, Oscar and his friends. His friends feel a little bit useless, like they're just kind of there for dialogue, but yeah, I don't know, Oscar's done well, and the antagonist, Plushtrap, has done well. He's not just a generic Plushtrap either. He's got a little bit of extra creepiness with the human eyes and teeth, which is very disturbing, and the action is fantastic. It's done really well. It takes a while to get to it, but not too long, and I never really found myself just waiting for the action to actually come, like in Lonely Freddy or To Be Beautiful. Here, I think it comes at just the right time, and it's really well done. The whole train sequence is great, and it ties into the Stitch Wraith story later on well as well. So this story is S tier, in my opinion. Moving on to Epilogue 2. Epilogue 2, in retrospect, it's not as crazy. It's the thing that's very interesting is Detective Larson meets Margie, and we know now Margie was the former, nanny of Jake from the Stitch Wraith. So that makes this a whole lot more interesting. But even when we first read it, it was very interesting because there's this cabinet filled with writing and scribbles in like Sharpie or something, which we still to this day have no idea quite what that's about. We know what was in the cabinet. It was the doll that the mask of the Stitch Wraith came from. But we still don't quite have answers, but I think this was a really solid Stitch Wraith story, and it raised some interesting questions. What's this cabinet? Who's Margie? And as Larson says, what happened in this house, while also tying this in with Plushtrap, in the train scene, where Plushtrap is picked off the railway tracks by the Stitch Wraith, which is really creepy and well done, and I like it. And it sets up the question of why the Stitch Wraith is collecting parts of robots and mechanical things from around the city. Around the country, even, maybe. So this, I think, is going in S tier. Next is 1:35 a.m., and I like this one. It's a bit controversial. It's a bit neither here nor there. There's a little bit of a divide in the community over this. Not as much as later stories like In the Flesh, but it's still there, that divide separating people from really agreeing over this story. I think it's well done. We got Ella, which is cool, a very interesting addition. We got a cameo for Phineas, one of the characters from the Stitch Wraith story, which is always cool to see. And we got a really interesting psychological horror this time, which actually deals with the character's mind instead of a random threat. We got so much of this also later on in the series, where it's someone's mind which is really the enemy. And it's been kind of overdone at this point, but I think 1:35 a.m. did it really well. Maybe that's just because it was the first real story to do this, but I don't know. I like it, and I like the way it's done. And I think the ending, even though it's a bit abrupt, it's fitting and kind of chilling. So 1:35 a.m., the ending brings it down a little bit, but I'd still say it's A tier.